Hello and welcome to Africa Health Week. I'm Dave Sharp and I'll be your moderator and host for the next few days, where we will be learning, innovating, networking, sharing best practice and generally pulling ourselves together to form a wonderful community of health professionals, not just here in Africa, but worldwide. This is part of a series of future health events that are taking place throughout the coming months. We've already been in Arabia, in the Arab world and in the UK. So we're now in Africa, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you some best practice from some wonderful speakers and presenters. Now, in order to take part, you can network. This platform gives you the chance to share your contact details. You can chat with each other. We've got a chat box so that you can do that. And also, you'll see shortly a Q&A box. Now, in the Q&A, you can ask any of our presenters and speakers a question. If there's a question that you see there, and it might even be yours, that you actually really want answered, and you see a bunch of other questions and you want to notch it up, then you can vote on those questions just to push them up the order. So that's how we use the Q&A. The chat will be running the whole time, and we're encouraging networking throughout, not just today, but the coming days as well. So if you're comfortable on social media as well, we are using the hashtag Africa Health Week, and Future Health Series is another hashtag we use. And if you're looking for us on social media, if you look for Future Health Innovations, predominantly we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. If, of course, you have to nip out, because one of the beauties of this is that we're coming to you wherever you are. You might be in your office, you might be at home, you could be at a place of work. Who knows where you are? But the beauty of it is we are flexible. So if you do happen to miss one of our presentations and you've looked at the program and you want to play catch up, then you can do that. All of our presentations are being recorded, they're being live streamed onto YouTube, and all that you have to do is look for the Future Health YouTube channel. So there we go. It looks like a promising and exciting 3 days or 4 days ahead. And let's take a look at what's coming up this morning, shall we? Shortly, we'll be listening to Tafi Mazikana. He'll be here talking about digital mental health and Africa. Then Vineeth will join us, the long-term strategy to improve healthcare with digital transformation, technology and innovation. And then before lunch, we'll talk to Yara, and she'll be talking about scaling digital health innovations in Africa. So that's the morning session. Lots of interesting stuff, as I mentioned there. We want you to network. We want you to get involved. We want you to innovate, share ideas. This is all about pulling together. And as I mentioned there, first up is Tafi Mazikana. Tafi is the co-founder and CEO of Vimbo Health, and he's going to be talking about digital mental health and Africa. Here he is now.
Thank you. So we are Vimbo, and our vision is for digital therapeutics to be widely available in Africa, and for Africa to have access to high quality solutions that are fit for our purposes. So my name is Tafi, or Tafadzwa Mazikana, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vimbo Health. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. My background professionally is in banking and finance, gained over in the UK, which I think leads to the question of what am I doing running a digital therapeutics startup and looking specifically in this area of mental health. Unsurprisingly, as is the case with a lot of mental health founders, I come from the perspective of being a service user and entering my journey into the realm of mental health through that avenue. So what I'm going to do today is to share my personal story because I think it's important to fight stigma from the front and be willing to share and hopefully impact people in that personal way, not even thinking about the broad strategic macroeconomic objectives, just starting with the individual, and hopefully embolden some of you to think about your personal circumstances and not just see this as a, I guess, business or industry presentation. After that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we are doing specifically at Vimbo Health. And lastly, just give some background into the area of digital therapeutics, which is very much our sector and something that, of course, some of you may already have an understanding and background in, but some may not and may want to learn more. So going into my journey to some extent, I want to share a statistic that was both frightening, interesting, and resonating, which is that it takes 10 years on average for a person with mental health difficulties to start getting help and start getting treatment. And this is quite a frightening number. And if we combine with that most people actually don't even enter into care, those people who take that 10 years are actually very fortunate and very lucky. And I count myself as one of those people because for me, most certainly, I can say that it took me more than 10 years to get to the stage of reaching out for help. And I'm not going to go through all of my 10 years meticulously to unpack this, but I will just touch on a few things that I would say would have been contributing factors that I wasn't aware of, and with hindsight, of course, all tied together. And firstly, the experience of my first startup is something that was very, I think, challenging, and in that turning point, because you get critical turning points in life where a lot of mental health difficulties sort of emanate from. A major one for a lot of people is coming out of university, coming out of high school, going into university into work life. And for me, a major significant change was going from a corporate environment into running my first startup with all the expectations of what an entrepreneur should be, what an entrepreneur should look like, how your metrics should be, and really placing a lot of pressure on myself and operating with a level of perfectionism, which it can be a good thing, but excessively done and continuously done can be detrimental. Layered on top of that, my corporate experience was amazing, but of course it's something that can also put a drain, and like anything, you need to recharge, and you need to be aware of when to recharge and how to recharge. And with the lack of that knowledge, something that's that has obviously been a great experience, learned a lot, can leave you coming out the other side not quite whole. So I was very, very fortunate to have been living in a very, I suppose, well-resourced environment in the UK. And I reached out to the UK Health Service, and they were able to give me some options as to how I could get help. One of those was, would you like face-to-face therapy? Another was, would you like to undertake a group therapy? And lastly, would you like to try this digital option that we've been having really good feedback on, and people are seeming to enjoy? So I, with my lack of knowledge on anything mental health, decided to go for the digital option. It was partly because, quite frankly, I was the embodiment of stigma at that point in my journey, and the thought of talking to a professional one-to-one was quite intimidating. Now I'm, of course, quite used to talking about my circumstances and mental health generally, but then it was a very intimidating idea to go from, not knowing anything to talking to an individual. And secondly, I was due to travel. So just for practical logistical reasons, it was better for me at that time to choose the digital option. I had very low expectations for this, to be very honest. But unsurprisingly, and the reason why I'm sitting here is that it worked very well. And for me, it was all that I needed. I came from a position of being diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. So definitely someone who, looking at the normal rule of things, could easily be put into expensive sort of face-to-face, higher intensity treatment. But I was helped through the digital option alone. So for me, that did not lead immediately into me becoming a founder in mental health. The transition was not that short. I started off by being very much an advocate of other people seeking help through these free resources that they have available to them. It actually frustrated me that so many people were not aware of this help that's freely available to them in their own health system, and very much advocating for people to seek help and to basically, to some extent, do what I did, or at least just know that is there if they don't need it. And throughout that process, continue to learn more and became increasingly painfully aware that, as people were rejecting or not being open to what I was making them aware of, there are us here in Africa who don't have access to essentially anything near that, which is freely available to, I guess, people in these more developed markets. And so those were the beginnings of thinking about Vimbo, thinking about what is the use case for digital therapeutics in Africa, and really being conscious that if I as an African person don't take interest in this, then who will? And really, at a certain point deciding that, it should be me, and committing myself to this journey of democratizing and increasing accessibility to mental health treatment in Africa. So I'm very fortunate to be in this journey together with my co-founder, who is Sherry Stain. And Sherry is our chief science officer. She has a background specifically in the deployment of digital therapies to populations in the UK, and she gained that whilst working for the UK Health Service in the improving access to psychological therapies division, which is an amazing division that now treats over 1 million people a year for common mental disorders. Sherry is originally from Durban, South Africa, and really shared my vision and passion, and really, to be honest, distress at the lack of mental health options that there are here on the ground in Africa. Through a digital platform, one of the key things that we're able to do is to address the barriers to people seeking help. And one of the first things that we really look at and take seriously is the barrier of knowledge. This is a really key one in the area of mental health. When we look at South Africa, there is a treatment gap of 92%, which means 92% of people who are likely to be in difficulty are not undergoing treatment. And so you can broadly expect that those people also just don't have a foundational knowledge on the area of mental health treatment. And so to go from not knowing anything to paying any amount of money, or in the case of face-to-face therapy, let's say 800 rands, the equivalent of about 40 pounds per hour for assistance, is a huge leap to take. And it's something where a lot of people, due to not understanding why is it important to address this, will actually not address it at all. So with a digital platform, what we're able to do is to start that process of accumulating knowledge on, in the first place, what is mental health and how does mental health relate to me at a very low barrier. That is something we are very keen on. In my own experience, once I knew a little bit, I wanted to know more, and I wanted to know a lot. So it's very important to get people in early and easily. The second one is quite intrinsic to a digital platform, and that's stigma. A platform which is digital, like ourselves, can be done privately. It can be done without the individual having to overcome the, I guess, at that time, trauma or fear of speaking to an individual. So that's something that's intrinsic to us, and that we are very keen on on pushing the destigmatization. And the last one is just access, which is that affordability aspect of the mental health ecosystem, where there are solutions that are out there, even here in South Africa. But a problem is that where people do have some awareness, some knowledge, they're simply not able to afford treatment. And so, through a much more cost-effective, scalable intervention, we're just able to reach more people. Looking at what our platform actually is, so we've talked a lot about mental health, about digital therapeutics at a high level, but what have we built and what are we actually doing at Vimbo? So our platform at the moment looks at digital therapeutics for anxiety and depression. We have housed our programs within our mobile app, and they provide a venue for self-guided, essentially learning, treatment, interaction with tools, and a building of skills that form into a treatment intervention. We take a very serious approach towards research. Now, within the mental health space, there's a lot of people doing a lot of great work, and anyone who wants to be involved in this space deserves a lot of credit. So definitely a lot of good people. But something we need to be cognizant of is that only 3% of mental health platforms are backed by research. And that is a difficult number, because really in mental health, we're dealing with a lot of people who are vulnerable. And so we've got to make sure as an industry that our platforms are safe and that they're effective before we start putting them into people's hands. And so we take a research-first approach in building and delivering our content. Lastly, we have localized our content for on the ground, starting with South Africa, and we are really taking on that mantle of discovering what does digital therapeutics look like for the space, which is a difficult journey, given that it's largely developed as a Western model, but we've decided to take this on and really embrace the challenge of that. In terms of the digital therapeutics sector, there's something interesting to talk about, which is, what is digital therapeutics in the first place? So it's quite a nascent area. It's, discovering itself in many ways, not just on the African continent, but also globally. And we're very lucky to have an industry group of leading players, leading startups, such as the co-founder of, I believe it's Big Health, and they have really formed this advocacy body on our behalf, which is amazing, even for us here in Africa, and something that we benefit from. And this body, one of the things that they did very early on was to try and define digital therapeutics, or DTX as we call it. And I just want to go through the fundamentals of this definition, because when we start to think about people who might be watching this, who are buyers perhaps of digital therapeutic solutions, it's important that they think about the potential solution in these terms and ask these questions of the provider. So the first thing is evidence-based therapeutic interventions. So by evidence-based, it's saying what is the basis really of the intervention. Vimbo, for example, is based on cognitive behavioral therapy principles, which have been proven scientifically through time. So we're very much standing on the shoulders of giants here, but using an evidence basis and sticking closely to that. So that evidence basis is important. Another thing to note, still on that first paragraph, they're used independently or in concert with medications. So that idea that it can be a standalone or it can be as an adjunct to ongoing treatment and other interventions. And that's very much how Vimbo is as well. We have usefulness to the individual in both of those scenarios. Within the second paragraph, DTX products incorporate advanced technology best practices relating to design, clinical validation, usability, and data security, and are reviewed and cleared or approved by regulatory bodies. So this is quite important in terms of the digital therapeutic solutions functioning within the regulatory environment that they are based in. And lastly, and most importantly, digital therapeutics empower patients. Our aim is really upliftment. The patients are what come first. They're the end objective for us. However, it's not only the patients that we have the ability to empower. We have the ability to empower healthcare providers by, for example, giving them better insights. We have the ability to empower payers who might be able to achieve their goals with greater ease and also with more data. So there you go, intelligent and accessible tools. And the last thing is just that focus on a high quality, safe, and effective intervention. So these to us are our principles. We work towards this, and it's our North Star. It's basically in a way the hard road, but we think is a vital road, especially when we consider that we're dealing with potentially vulnerable people. And so just thinking of that concept of Vimbo can be used as a standalone or as an adjunct to ongoing care, I just want to dig into that a little bit more. And what we are really talking about here is how do we interact with the existing practitioner population. And, it's a key topic because I think digital therapeutics are sometimes seen only as a replacer, and that's not really the objective. The objective is there are people who are not in care at all, and we want to bring more of those people into care. But there are also people who are in care who can benefit from an additional intervention. And so from the point of view of a practitioner who's considering the type of the care plan for an individual, there's quite frankly more options. In mental health, there is no one size fits all. So that ability to offer something additional is, in our opinion, critical and might benefit some groups of patients. So, for example, I guess typically men who don't want to have that one-on-one discussion, or might be less inclined rather to have that one-on-one discussion. The next one is more touch points. So as a practitioner, you can only see your client perhaps once every week, once every 2 weeks. By having a digital intervention as well, they can continue to interact with treatment even when they're not in the room with you. It's just a reminder. It allows them to journal. It allows them to keep track and to be able to present clearer insights on the next meeting, because they themselves can look back on their history from using a platform like ours and be able to, drive a more effective treatment overall. And lastly, there is flexibility. And that is really promoting the idea that digital therapeutics can be used at various stages in the journey of care. They're amazing for getting people into the process of care to begin with, where they don't know much about mental health. And as I said, creating that small first step for them to get involved. But also, interestingly, and research shows, a digital therapeutic intervention can be very useful in the area of relapse prevention. So for a person who has undergone a high intensity treatment, perhaps for major depressive disorder, and in an inpatient care setting, for them to receive a platform that they can continue to have some touch point with a low intensity form of care, has been shown to be able to significantly reduce the rate of relapse. So there's a huge amount of flexibility in the way that we can start to think about and deploy digital therapeutics. And with the shift that we're seeing towards value-based care within the healthcare system, where we're focusing more, or other institutions are being rewarded more for the outcomes that the patient experiences. And this is going to be something that's quite powerful from point of view of being a benefit to the whole ecosystem. So as I said, not just benefiting individuals, but benefiting healthcare providers, payers, and the whole ecosystem is what we aim to do, beyond just that interaction with the individual. It's been an interesting time, and I don't think this would be a presentation if I didn't include the impacts of COVID, because, you know, in our area, it's really changed a lot. We started this journey before COVID, and we were then trying to convince people that, look, there is a pandemic in the area of mental health. You know, the impacts are broad. It affects a huge number of people. However, COVID really brought home to a lot of people who perhaps had never experienced mental health difficulties before, what exactly that is like. And also, in addition to that, the aspect whereby people were not able to access the traditional routes of care meant that digital therapeutics in particular had a flourishing and have continued to have a flourishing due to that. And we see that through IPOs. We're seeing Pear Therapeutics now preparing for its IPO. We've seen Teladoc being involved in merger activity. So definitely it's something that has changed a lot for our space within digital therapeutics. There has also been a change in the attitudes of regulators, which has been very promising. The FDA, during this post-COVID time, has established this Digital Center of Excellence, which is a real step forward in starting to understand digital therapeutics, how to interact with them, and how to have more seamless deployments. So really recognizing the benefit of digital therapeutics really to the populations. And apart from the regulators, healthcare professionals are also embracing digital tools, and you know that all of that has really been something that we can say, you know, in a very dark time has been a silver lining, and 100% we expect a lot of the dynamics that have been created to remain in play and to continue to impact us for years to come. So this is to a certain extent something positive out of this negative situation. Also, something that we've seen from the UK side, I'm of course a huge fan of the organization that treated me initially for my own depression and anxiety. So so I think it's really worth showcasing the amazing work that the NHS and their Improving Access to Psychological Therapies division is doing. They were set up, I believe, just over 8 years ago, 8 to 10 years perhaps. And by 2019-20, they had 1.17 million referrals start treatment. So these are people just in England who were able to, like me, see a link, get access to this, or perhaps get referred to this service. And of those people who started treatment, 0.6 million of them completed a treatment. Of course, you have a drop off along the way, but 0.6 million is amazing. And against its 50% recovery target as an organization, the IAPS division achieved 51.1% of referrals moving to recovery in that 2019-20 period. And something that I find super interesting as someone who's in the digital space is that of those who ended treatment, 8% of them ended it on a computer-based modality, which is really powerful because the end point of treatment is really showing the effectiveness of the digital route. Yes, some people would have begun on the digital route and being stepped up to a higher intensity intervention. So, for example, begun on the digital route and be stepped up to a face-to-face intervention because that seems more appropriate for you. But seeing 8% of people ending treatment on the computer-based modality is something that is really powerful, because it means at a minimum close to 1 in 10 people can be treated for mental health conditions through digital and are ready to have that kind of treatment and would be palatable to it today. So that's something that's super interesting and really encouraging for our space. But that is, of course, in the UK. So what about here in Africa? The challenge that there is really for us in Africa is that this kind of public infrastructure, this social safety nets, or rather state-funded, I should say, safety net, is something that doesn't exist for us. We have a lot of things that are in our favor culturally. If we look at the concept of Ubuntu, which is something that is, I guess, more widely known in Zimbabwe, we call it Hunu, which is that concept of the society being responsible for each other. I exist because you exist, and so your problems and helping you are my problems. And societally, that helps a lot, because people are less likely to get into a distress financially or relationship wise that is not supported and seen as a problem of the community to solve. So there are a lot of benefits that are intrinsic to Africa culturally. However, from a point of view of infrastructure to be able to treat people once they need more than that, that's where there is a challenge. And, you know, as we see digital therapeutics flourishing in other countries, my fear was, of course, and is, of course, that Africa might get left behind. And Africa is much more in need of these types of interventions that we offer, because firstly, there's, of course, the stresses that come with the insecurities that a lot of people face to their situations, but also, of course, those very high stigmas and treatment gaps that we get. So definitely, you know, Africa is something is a place where more tools are needed so that people can have access. And unsurprisingly, this is where we come in by taking an interest from the ground up in what do digital therapeutics look like for Africa, and saying, being on the ground, tailoring our programs, our platform, our technology to Africa, but also being willing, able, and active in researching that platform locally on the ground. And we've been in the process of doing a research study together with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. That's a leading NGO in the area of mental health, and has crisis lines that take about 1,500 calls a day from people who are in distress. So they've been amazing partners to have in this local South African research study. And that study has been ethically approved by the Human Sciences Research Council. So we've collected incredible data from our participants, which show us to be having effectiveness levels which are really on a par with our Western counterparts, which is something we're very proud of. And that research, of course, involves a qualitative aspect of having a feel for how people are finding our platform in its self-guided nature. And what's exciting about this research is we really did give people the self-guided experience where all they got was the platform and they were able to go away and do their course of treatment when they want, where they want, from their device, going through our content, listening to the audio, engaging with our tools, our journaling, our meditations. And apart from the quantitative data, which objectively shows us to be effective and safe, we also have the qualitative, which is great to read because we're dealing with people. And on the left there, a feedback from a certain user that you feel like you were talking to a friend. So we've really taken great care in writing that content to be accessible. Another user, there is a lot of information, and it is a less intrusive way of help. So that's that objective that I talked about early on of how do you reduce stigma. And lastly, it's easy to understand language is a big plus. And this is something that we found really interesting when looking at people whose first spoken language is not English. They were still able to engage with the platform and find it easy enough to understand. Of course, in the future, we'll be looking to localize that even more. But that's something that we found very encouraging. And another comment, which does not use a lot of data. When we say made for Africa, we're not talking about a lower quality of platform. We're just talking about a platform that relates to the needs of a user here. Someone in Africa doesn't have, put it another way, someone who's living in the UK might stream Game of Thrones on their way to work. But that amount of data could be someone in Africa's data for allocation for 3 months or even 6 months. So that idea that the platform is data light is very important to us. And of course, this user also found the programs and the platform to be very practical. So great feedback to have from real users on the ground. And so that brings me to the end of this presentation. It's been an absolute pleasure to be part of Africa Health Week. Really humbled to be called on to speak on the use case for digital therapeutics in Africa, or at least give a starting point of understanding. And that being a starting point, if you are interested in knowing more, I would encourage you very much to get in touch with me. That's my email address over there, tafi@vimbohealth.com. And you can also look at our website. And as I said, we've just scratched the surface of what we're doing, what the space is all about. If there are people here who are interested in partnerships on an academic level, we are looking to do more research. If there are people who have a pool of beneficiaries who could benefit from a digital intervention, such as ourselves, then I would very much encourage you to contact me, as we have started towards the commercial rollout. And so that's very much something that I would like to talk to you about and see whether we can help your beneficiaries, whether it's a pool of employees or if it's an insured population. I would love to talk to you about that. And lastly, if there are, I guess, investors, people who are in the space of investing, we are likely to be raising a round in the near future. So do contact me if this is an area that you're interested in exploring. It's definitely one where there's an opportunity to be part of having a real impact on people's lives. And it's something that I found very beneficial in my personal journey. And so the more people who want to feel what I feel, I really encourage you to get on board and to get in touch with me. So thank you very much.
And I'm delighted to say that Tafi joins us now. Hi, Tafi. Good to see you. Thanks for your presentation, but thanks also for sharing your personal journey. We were speaking off camera about how difficult it can be. You mentioned in your presentation 10 years for some people to seek help. Often men take much longer. And you're addressing that with your platform. So thank you for sharing that. We've had lots of questions. We've got 5 minutes. We'll start with the first question, which is, you mentioned data there, data usage, of course, and it's a light touch data use platform. But what about protecting data? How do you keep people's data safe?
Yes, that's extremely important and a key topic in mental health. The way I talk about it is infrastructure in terms of a road and a car. we're putting people on a journey whereby they're provided with the road, but the car, that being their thoughts, feelings, and emotions, quite obviously belong to them. So we take it very seriously. In South Africa, POPI, which is the equivalent of GDPR, has been introduced. And we are, of course, compliant with that. Before POPI was introduced, we have a framework in place. And really, it's all about having consent, so being clear to the user as to how their data will be managed, and really following those protocols and making sure we're taking, I think, a best-in-class approach towards the use of data and how that data is leveraged for improving the platform and further research.
That's reassuring. I'm sure people will be delighted to hear that. And of course, in terms of accessibility, Africa is divided by wealth, and we need to make sure that this is available to as many people as is possible. How do we approach that?
I think it's about stakeholders, because in mental health, within a Western model, the public healthcare system is so strong that a lot of people can start to have access to care. And I think in the African context, we need to start working together as stakeholders within the private sector to all band together to say, how do we make access to care available? And the return on investment across the board of affected stakeholders is so big that they should play a role in making platforms like us available for free to the end user. So from a government perspective, there's a huge ROI from reducing unemployment. For employers, there's a huge ROI from reduced absenteeism, presenteeism, and those related problems. For insurers, there's a huge ROI. So there's so many affected stakeholders that even in the absence of, together with the public sector, we should be able to get together and solve access, because we all benefit from doing so.
I mean, you're selling it to me brilliantly, and I see the benefit and the return on investment. Is funding, though, still a stumbling block? Is that a challenge still?
I think there is a lot of funding that's coming into the space. So, for example, in the South African public sector, in 2016, 615 million was spent on mental health. But what we're trying to do is think about where that funding is going, and making sure that it's going to earlier stage proactive intervention and tools such as ours. So we're not just saying, let's get more money in, but we're saying, let's direct more money towards early intervention, because that stops, that's where you get the most bang for your buck, so to speak. It's a lower cost and you can treat more people. So that's what we try to push.
You and I were speaking about how you measure success, and of course you've got some wonderful testimonials, and for those people that have provided those, clearly they're benefiting from the system and the platform and the fact that they can access it. But what about stats? Governments and funding bodies often say, give me stats, how is this working, what's the success rate? You've got some anecdotal stuff, but we need some hard data.
Yes, and that's the beauty of digital. We get to start to build hard data around a subject in which data is, I guess, mostly lacking. And it's really why we've chosen a research focused approach. So our research is ethically approved, which means the data that comes out of it has more weight towards it. And eventually we will publish that and let that be peer reviewed. So having that rigor around the data that we collect is essentially how we're approaching it, so we can prove that effectiveness already now, and even more as we go forward in the coming months. Well,
you mentioned earlier, and we've got time just for one more perhaps comment, in that this is just one of many things that you could be offered. You were offered various interventions in your journey, and this is just one. Are people using a combination of all three?
I think people can. Unfortunately, here in Africa, we won't have access to all three, so we can be a great starting point for people on their journey towards mental health. So even if you don't have access to that face-to-face, at least you can have something. Something is better than nothing, and that's sort of what we see in our study as well. People are just excited with the aspect of hope from having just something.
Brilliant. Well, honestly, I think you're doing an amazing job. I'm sure a lot of people, and judging by the comments that you get, agree as well. So keep up the good work, and send our best wishes to your team that are working on this. And it's one of those things, as you mentioned, with the pandemic as well, that needs addressing. A lot of people who want this kind of support. So Tafi, thank you. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your day also. Thanks to the attendees.